Hi, I'm Julie Poehlmann-Tynan from the School of Human Ecology at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And I'd like to tell you a bit today about some recommendations that have come out of one of the recent studies that I completed called Young Children with Jailed Parents. And so today I will be talking about the recommendations based on three main findings of the study. And to summarize, the first is that positive caregiver interactions with children and positive home environments can facilitate secure attachments in children, so caregivers are really important. The second one was that there are both positives and challenges regarding young children's visitation with parents in jail settings. And the third one is that the residential stability of jailed parents in the year prior to their incarceration is really important for children's well-being. So I just wanted to start by telling you a little bit about the resilience model that I use. And this really focuses on the whole child. So it ranges from things like children's safety and material well-being all the way to their physical well-being, their emotional well-being and mental health, and the relationships that they have with others and their communities and the context in which they live, as well as their learning and development. So we look at all these different things when we're studying the kids and also when we're making recommendations about the kids. So regarding resources available for families, the first thing that I'll talk about is resources focusing on children's emotions and behaviors when a parent is incarcerated. And then the second set of resources I'll talk about are visits with incarcerated parents and their children. So the best resource that I've found for young children whose parents are incarcerated regarding the children's emotional and behavioral well-being are the materials created by Sesame Street as part of their resilience initiative, and it's called Little Kids, Big Challenges, Incarceration. And it focuses on young children ages 3 to 8 who have an incarcerated parent. And the materials provide a lot of great ideas regarding how to support children who are experiencing the incarceration of a parent, including how to support their emotions about being separated from the parent and the parent's incarceration, how to talk to children about the incarceration, and what to look for in children if they're struggling, and things that are needed to help children really thrive. And so the materials include a number of different aspects. The first is a DVD that has videos on it. The second part is a caregiver resource guide. And the third part is a children's book. And I'll talk about each of these three pieces. They're all available in both English and Spanish. And we had a bicultural team and bilingual team develop the Spanish side, so it's not just a strict translation. So Sesame Street developed a new Muppet character for this initiative, and his name is Alex the Muppet, and he has an incarcerated father. And in the videos that Sesame Street produced, he talks about having a dad who's not there and who's been in jail for some time. And Alex talks about his feelings about that. Now, the interesting thing is that young children see Muppets as other children. And so they see the materials as like another child talking to them about having an incarcerated dad. And so one of the messages that Sesame Street was trying to convey in these materials is you are not alone, just to help children understand that there are many other children like them who have an incarcerated parent, and that it's okay to talk about the children's feelings and their fears and their worries. And so another message that Alex the Muppet is provided with in these materials is that not only that he's not alone, but also it's not his fault. The parents are responsible for their own actions, and it has nothing to do with the children. And then the third message is that it's okay to have big feelings and different feelings about it, that's really normal, and it's okay to express those in different ways as long as it's done in a safe environment. In the videos, it shows Alex interacting with other Muppets who support him and also adults who support him. Another aspect of the videos involves interviews with children who've experienced the incarceration of a parent, and it can be helpful for children to watch those and see that other kids, real kids, have had similar experiences to them. The materials also have a children's book that is about a child whose parent isn't around, but who has a special day at school that involves usually bringing a parent, and it shows how that child handles that situation. And it can be a good model for kids to know, even if their parent isn't available because they're incarcerated, they still can enjoy times at school with other family members who are like parent substitutes. One of the really interesting things about these materials is that the videos, even though they're directed at really young children, can be really helpful to all members of the family. And so we found that kids age 3 to 8 benefit from them, but also younger and older siblings and caregivers and even the parents themselves. And in particular, we've gotten good feedback about the segments of the videos involving Murray Muppet, who interviews young kids with incarcerated parents and talks to them about how they stay in touch with their incarcerated parent and what they miss about the incarcerated parent and what kind of feelings they have. And I think that's really helpful for young children and their families to see that. So that's one set of resources that's available for families of children with incarcerated parents. Another resource that's available is my blog. It's called kidswithincarceratedparents.com. And I update it with the latest research that I translate into sort of plain language. And so it can be helpful for people who want to read a little bit about the information, or I even put links to the full text studies. And so people can, read the science stuff if they're really interested in that. And I have sections that are for parents, for caregivers, for children, and for students and professionals. And so whoever you are, there might be something on there for you. The third resource that I recommend is on the University of Wisconsin Extension webpage, and it involves materials that were developed for grandparents who are raising their grandchildren. Now, we know that when a mom is incarcerated, the most common caregiver is a grandparent. And so these materials are particularly relevant for those situations. But what we've heard over the years is that many families find the materials helpful, even if it's not a grandparent raising a grandchildren, even if it's a mom raising kids whose fathers are in jail or prison. And the materials are based in attachment, and so they focus a lot on children's developing relationships with the people who love them and care about them the most. And they give really helpful tips about what is normative development for young children, what is their usual course of emotional development and relationship development, and then what can happen if a parent is absent for some or all of certain developmental periods in the child's life. And then it also gives helpful information about what are behavioral and emotional red flags where you might want to get some help for children, or what are some things that you can do to help children stay in touch with their parents, not just phone calls and visits, but lots of other creative ideas like creating scrapbooks or mini videos or reading books that a parent has recorded and things like that. So I recommend that particular website, and those materials are free and available. Another website that I think is really helpful is from Goodreads, and that provides a list of books for children in which the child character in the book has a parent in jail or prison. And there are books across a huge developmental range, all the way from picture books for the youngest children to chapter books for older children. And usually the material is handled in a really sensitive way. And so it can be particularly helpful for children with an incarcerated parent to hear how other kids have experienced this and what they've gone through. And so I really recommend that as well. This particular book, What is Jail, Mommy?, is a good way to talk to children about what happens when a parent is incarcerated, because young children often need just basic things explained to them. Another website that is helpful involves the Children of Incarcerated Parents Bill of Rights. It was developed in San Francisco by their Children of Incarcerated Parents program, and it's useful because it lists a number of things that really sometimes society doesn't really think about, but it can be really helpful to think about regarding children with incarcerated parents. For example, the first one is to be kept safe and informed at the time of my parents' arrest. And that seems pretty basic, but a lot of times we're finding that that doesn't always happen, and children might be sort of left out of the process, or people think, well, the children don't really understand because they're too young. But indeed, they do observe and they do comprehend, but they sometimes can be confused about it and need clarification. Another one of the items is to be well cared for in my parents' absence. And that is really consistent with all the research focusing on the importance of the caregiver for children with incarcerated parents. And another one is to speak with, see, and touch my parent. And that really means that children have the right to visit their incarcerated parent when it's deemed as appropriate. And there are other ones as well. And I think as a society and as people who want to support these children, it's really important that we look at those Bill of Rights and see what we can do to support the kids. There's also a video that can help prepare children for their visits with an incarcerated parent. And this video is part of the Sesame Street materials. And the Sesame Street materials are not only available in the hard copy kit that I showed you before, but it's also available as a free app for smartphones and tablets, and also online. You can download the materials to any computer. And one of the videos depicts an animated character, a little girl and her family who are going to visit a father who's in prison. And what's particularly interesting about that animated video is it shows a non-contact visit. And what we found is that a lot of times it's the non-contact visits where children may seem a little unsure or don't understand exactly what's happening because they can't touch the parent or sit on their lap. And so we've found that this video is particularly helpful if children are having a non-contact visit. There's also a really helpful handout from the government in California, the state government, and it's just a handout providing tips to help make a smooth visit. And there are things that people can follow, like setting up a routine, how to say hi and goodbye, and how to help the child have a really smooth visit. One of the things that I've written about and talked about a lot is the need for improving the quality of visitation for children, because every day children walk into corrections facilities all over our country, and sometimes this can be a really positive opportunity to connect with an incarcerated parent and to build really important parent-child relationships. And in other cases, it can be kind of stressful. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that there are some recommendations for making visits as child-friendly as possible. And these include things like providing a safe, friendly environment for visits, that correction staff know how to interact with children, even if it's a brief contact, that they're not gruff and harsh and rough, but really pleasant and compassionate. We also recommend that there's open communication among everybody involved so that people talk about and prepare children for visits and talk about what's going to happen. And we definitely recommend there is contact between visits. And so phone calls, letters, sending cards or pictures, or other means of communication can be really helpful for children between visits. We also know that incarcerated parents need support as well. To make the visits as positive as possible, they need to know what are great ways of interacting with children, even if you can't touch them the whole time? And what kind of questions can you ask? And when it's a good time to just listen. We think that face-to-face contact visits are best, and in-home video visitation is a good supplement to those face-to-face visits. But we also know that that isn't possible in every case, and especially in jails across the country, face-to-face contact visits aren't possible. So we have some ideas here for how to make video visitation and any other kind of non-contact visitation a little bit more child-friendly. Inherently, they're not child-friendly, but these are just some ideas to make them more child-friendly. And it's really important to check out the rules on the website of the jail or prison in advance to know what clothing is appropriate, what footwear is appropriate, how many people can be there, what kind of ID is needed, because we've seen so many people turned away over the years. It can be really disappointing to a child who's come a long way or is really expecting to see their parent and then get turned away for kind of a technical reason. Again, preparing children for what to expect is really helpful. Most jails allow children to bring in something to do while they wait, and so they could bring in a book or coloring materials. And then also knowing that in most jail settings and in non-contact settings, there's going to be limited privacy. Oftentimes the visits occur sort of in a group setting so that you can see and hear other people's visits, and it can be a little bit overwhelming for very young children. And so just telling them what to expect is a way to handle that. And also, it's really important for caregivers to recognize that they are so important for how children handle these visits, and that know if they can focus on the children and support the children and make sure the kids, get prompts for something to say or something to do or to blow kisses or anything can be really helpful to children. We often notice that young children want to sit on their caregivers' laps or hold their hand, and just expecting that they might be a little bit nervous during part of the visit is just sort of normal. It's also important for caregivers to give children a warning before the visit ends. So if they know in advance how long the visits will take, if it's 15 minutes or 20 minutes or 45 minutes or 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever the timing is for the visits, it's important for the caregivers to know. What we found can be really disconcerting for young children is if a visit abruptly ends, like if a video screen just goes blank, or if the incarcerated parent just has to stand up and walk away. It's really helpful to kids to have a goodbye time and a winding down time. And also, sometimes caregivers can be pretty stressed out during these visits because they want it to go well, or they're ambivalent about bringing the child, but really trying to emphasize the positive while coping with the stress and recognizing the stress is a good way to handle that. And if you can stay focused on children and how they're doing, it can make the situation go really well. We found that some of the best visits are when there's a lot of nonverbal communication as well as verbal communication. So when there's little games that people can play, the incarcerated parent can, blow kisses and make little faces, and they can, even in a plexiglass visit, they can put their hands up to the glass, and children can put their hands up, and they can, be silly. That kind of levity can be really helpful and help children recognize that this can be a really positive time. So in addition to these resources for families related to children's emotions and behaviors and visits, there are some other resources that are absolutely critical for these families, especially for incarcerated parents. And in order to really have resilience and thriving in the context of all these challenges, we think it's absolutely important for some basic roots to be put down, and anything that can help incarcerated parents with their safety, housing stability, employment, income benefits, especially as they're transitioning back into the community, that can also be particularly helpful for children, especially because we found in our study that the mobility and residential instability of jailed parents has an effect on children's behavior problems. We also know that many incarcerated individuals have important health and mental health care needs, and addressing those is absolutely essential for child and family well-being. And open communication and contact among children, partners, exes, parents, extended family members can be really helpful for young children. We definitely recommend talking to young children in a way that's at their level, that's developmentally appropriate and honest about the parent's incarceration and impending reunification with the family, and that it can dispel the child's confusion and help support them during this time. We also think it's important to help the incarcerated parents reintegrate into their community and have contact with positive friends and churches and other institutions that can support them. And that can really facilitate reconciliation and relationships. So these are the findings and recommendations that have emerged from some of the recent work that I've done. I hope it ends up being helpful to you, and thank you very much for your attention.